Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you are doing well. I'm doing well because today we're talking about music and we have another episode of What I Love. And today I have my special guest, John Clauser, and we're just talking about Christian rock, Christian metal, why I love Christian metal, and sort of the convergence of spirituality with the music that we love. So I'm going to pass it over to my guest, John, to introduce themselves, and then we'll start our discussion.
All right. Thank you, Darcy, for having me on. Privileged to do this. This is always a wonderful opportunity to talk about a side of Johnny Metal that I don't always get to talk a lot about. So this is going to be fun.
Awesome. Cool.
So so for folk, just so people know, you can find me on YouTube. I have a channel called My Music Corner, and so that's kind of my little home away from home, I guess you could say. So.
Fantastic. So why don't we start with, I mean, you brought up Johnny Metal, so why don't we start with, Johnny Metal and your musical journey?
Okay, so the funny name, I'll give you how I got the nickname Johnny Metal first, real quickly. So it's 2002, and I go to this small little venue that was hosting Christian hardcore and hardcore bands, young bands, just local bands. And there was a particular band that I saw was going to be playing there, and I was a fan of. And so I went to go see them, and in this small little room, it's about 40 people there. And I just kept going because it was kind of a neat little vibe. And I got to know the guy who ran it, and he knew my name. He knew my name was John. He knew I was into more metal, more so than hardcore. Johnny Metal came out of it because that was how he could remember it. So that's how I got the nickname Johnny Metal. So um not a very interesting story, but that's where it all starts. But when it comes to my musical journey, I've been all over the place. I can remember being a very young child and getting to hear this Godspell as a very young child. And there's you have a lot of the 70s hippie songs that everybody fell in love with on radio. Day by Day was a big one, but I mean, like I don't know, Turn Back Old Man's kind of a suave song, but you have a lot of good little stuff, good musical, loosely based from the biblical stories. So you get those kind of images of churchy kind of stuff. Um, so unfortunately, though, I would drift into discovering Kiss, um, Pink Floyd, Genesis. My sister and brother listened to all. I have a much older brother and sister than I do. So at 6 years old, I'm hearing Genesis, I'm hearing Pink Floyd, I'm hearing Steely Dan, I'm hearing Steppenwolf, Foghat, Kansas, and all these different bands. But Kiss was like my main. That was who I saw. They were like my superheroes. So I went from Kiss. Then by about sixth grade, I started getting more into like AC/DC, Def Leppard. Then I discovered bands like Judas Priest, um, and all the heavy metal that was coming out, Iron Maiden eventually. Then I would realize, Ozzy was another big one in school. Everybody loved, all the kids loved Ozzy. I saw who this Randy Rhoads guy was, and I was like, I like this guy. And then, of course, I find out he gets killed in a plane crash tragically. So then you go backwards with Ozzy, then you discover Black Sabbath, then you hear Robert Plant, you'd go backwards, you listen to Led Zeppelin. So you hear all these different bands. So by the mid 80s, one of the bands that I would one of the bands I would get into, sorry, I'm trying to dig out my
Of course, yeah.
show and tell, was Striper. We'll
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
talk a little bit more about this one, but I heard Striper in the mid 80s, Soldiers Under Command. Um, and then of course, To Hell with the Devil, which is
Yeah.
a classic album. But then also at the same time, when I'm listening to stuff like this as a teenager, what else am I listening to? Yes, I'm also listening to Slayer Hell Awaits.
Mhm.
so so yes, folks, I have both Slayer Hell Awaits and Striper To Hell with the Devil. But
Yeah.
anyway, um As this guy would say, Larry Norman, though, why should the devil have all the good music? So, as one of his more famous songs goes. But in the 90s, I would go through Wasp. That would be like my go-to band. I was getting into a lot of heavier stuff, Slayer, obviously, for a while. Pantera into the 90s. Started listening to a little bit of the early grunge, like Pearl Jam's 10 was pretty much always on my CD player, or Nirvana's, Soundgarden, a little bit of all that. Um, and then that's kind of what I stuck with. I stuck with the bands that I really liked. You know, Mid 90s comes along, and that's when life just completely falls apart for me. Um, Choices in life kind of takes me a different route, and basically, I basically look up to the heavens and say, "Okay, God, you got my attention. Have your will with me." So that's essentially my journey up until um, I discover my faith, and I try to live more by faith, I guess, and read more scriptures and become more of a godly man, I guess you could say. So.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So you brought up, were you listening to sort of these Christian bands before you kind of became more connected with your faith, or were you raised in a household?
I was raised, well, we went to church, but it wasn't something that was like hammered into us. So I can't say I was listening to a lot of that kind of stuff. My mom was like a big
Right.
Johnny Mathis fan.
Sure.
My dad loved big band music. He liked Stan Kenton and Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong, stuff like that. So there was like a hodgepodge of a little bit of everything.
Mhm.
So I can't say I grew up with the Christian music, because really in the 70s and 80s, you really had to look for it.
Yeah.
If you really want to be honest, you really had to look for it. It just wasn't as prevalent as it would be becoming like in the late 80s, thanks to bands like Striper. Amy Grant would be another one that would really come to the forefront. Yeah, even Kansas. Carrie, you could see Carrie's development in his spiritual journey. And then by Audio Visions, is that was pretty much when he came out being a Christian, as did Dave Hope. So then they do a coat. Then Steve Walsh leaves. Here comes John Elefante, who happens to be a Christian as well. He does a lot of stuff in the Christian industry, and and then of course after those couple of albums, then they all part. And Carrie does the AD thing, and John goes on to producing more Christian music and things like that with his brother. So, but yeah, it really wasn't. It really wasn't that much in the forefront, because you think about the 80s and you think about some of these bands, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the Christian, what was being shown was probably, you were probably seeing all of the Jim Bakers and the Jimmy Swaggarts and those kind of people, and so Christianity probably wasn't getting a good rap even back then, and it just gets worse as time goes along. But so yeah, yeah, being a Christian and doing hard rock, heavy metal, or any kind of hard rock where it was getting in the mainstream, that's, you really had to search for it.
I think as well, if we're talking about, hard rock, heavy metal in, well, I mean, since the beginning of those genres, but certainly in the 70s and 80s, the imagery is that of excess, right? Of, hedonism, of, any explicit or implicit sin, right?
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, we're talking about Slayer. We have all this, evil imagery. And so I wonder, in your own life, did you experience or do you experience, pushback from people saying, how can you reconcile, being a Christian and having certain beliefs? And I know you and I can talk about this, and I think it makes total sense to us. But certainly there might be people that have said the opposite, saying you can't, no way could you call yourself, a follower of XYZ if you're enjoying this kind of art or imagery.
Yeah, I think the way I reconcile it now is I'm not the person I once was. Um, I look at myself now and yeah, I can still enjoy Slayer's Hell Awaits. Do I like the lyrics? No, not really. There's a couple songs on there that really makes me cringe now, but there's that musical itch in me that still appreciates the talent that was given to Carrie and Jeff and Dave and Tom. So I can still appreciate that now. But it's but I reconcile it by saying I'm not the person I was. It's like someone asked me, is like, how can Blackie Lawless, as you see over my shoulder here, how can he still do a song like Animal, F like a beast, and call himself a Christian? And the more I thought about it, I'm like, the only thing I can think of when he did that in concert, he medleys it with the Real Me, with the cover of the Real Me from the Who, which was on the Headless Children album. I ended up at the preacher full of lies and hate. I seemed to scare him a little, but he showed me to the golden gate. To me, that's how he justifies being able to still do Animal, because he has grown as a musician, he's grown as a person, he's grown as a storyteller. He still has to show a side of him, but that doesn't mean that's who he still is. So that's kind of how I look at it now. I can still appreciate the music of my youth, but know that, say, hey, that's I'm not that same guy. So I have a completely different eyes, different eyes and heart to view it from.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the head there, right? The journey of spiritualism and is all about growth and recognizing who we are and where we are going and kind of how we interact with people in the world. And I think to remove ourselves from that kind of it gets rid of what it means to be a person. I think, to realize this is who I have been, these are the things I've done, but this is where I can go and this is where I am now. Kind of that idea of acceptance. Um, and we talked about Kansas a bit already. But the thing I find is their spiritual lyrics were there from the start, I think. Certainly on, Point of No Return and Left Overture, there's plenty of spirituality on there. And then people look
Oh,
at, yeah,
I think you can go as far back as Song for America.
yeah,
Just listen to the Devil Game.
yeah. And, people will look at audio visions and then those, follow-up albums, Vinyl Confessions, and say, the reason they're not great albums is because of the explicit change to Christianity. I disagree. I think, well, one, lyrically, I don't think it's any more overt than what we got on the prior albums. I think it's just the stylistic change that people had a hard time with. As well, I'll bring up, there's a lot of folks who are Christians in bands that don't market themselves as Christians. So we have, Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, Nico from Iron Maiden, Alice Cooper, for example. I found a really good quote from 2018, where he says, Christianity is basically a one-on-one relationship with Jesus. If you're a disciple of Jesus, it doesn't say anywhere there that I can't be a performer. It doesn't say anything in there that I can't be an artist. And then he closes this with something I like. I don't do Christian rock, but I'm a Christian that does rock music. And I think that's the key, right? People can be multifaceted. You can blend them, you can have a spiritual aspect to yourself, a musical aspect to yourself. You can keep them separate. You can bring them together. Both are fine. You don't, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think another quote he had said where and I'm going to paraphrase because I'm going to butcher it, but he said, trashing a hotel, that's nothing. Anybody can do that. But in this day and age, in the rock and roll lifestyle and that mainstream, and you show yourself as a Christian and being a Christian, that's true rebellion.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I said, I'm completely paraphrasing it, but I know it's a quote that's something like that that's out there from him. Good stuff.
Yeah, I think as well. Just that idea. I think a lot of people, they have the stereotype of any kind of spiritual music or Christian music as just being worship music, right? Something that would get played in church. There's this quote from King of the Hill that I like from Hank Hill. You're not making Christianity better, you're making rock worse. And I think famously the band Creed was denoted as a Christian band. I can't find anywhere that they're actually a Christian band. I think people just took the name and because they got slagged for basically being overexposed. Like the reason people disliked Creed is because they got played on the radio ad nauseum. Um, and we kind of got tired of that post grunge sound that they had. Um, but nowhere are they actually a Christian band. And I think that imagery just kind of got lumped in with them.
Yeah, I think Scott had certainly had his struggles, but the rest of the band certainly weren't that way. And you know, Evanescence would be another example. You
Yeah.
know, that first album I think was sold in Christian stores for, and they're just like, why,
Yeah.
why are we in this thing? You know, but you know, I always like to think that you know, music I always think that music is just a gift from God, you know, and it's he says it plainly in the word, you know, about praising him with the trumpet sound and the lute and the harp and tambourine and dance. So it's I mean that's going back 2000, 3000 years ago when that stuff was written. So it's always been there, and this is how people have kind of taken it. But yeah, I agree with you with the Creed thing, but
Mhm.
now I think Scott, I think really is a lot more transparent about his faith these days.
Yeah.
From interviews I've read.
Yeah. I think what you just brought up, if you're a fan of music or any art, you know that you know that thing that you just brought up, that
Mm-hmm.
feeling you listen to a piece of music or you see a play or a movie or a painting or something, and you can tell there's something there that's communicated to you that you can't actually put words to you, but you know exactly what it's saying.
Right.
Um, and that's just that's just a beautiful moment. I find you listen to a song that it heals you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It it tells you what you need to hear at that time. Um, and maybe that's a message of faith, maybe it's a message of healing in any aspect of your life, or it's just affirming to you as a person of saying, yeah, that, I'm really upset right now and this song gets me, or I'm really happy right now and this song gets me, or
Sure.
whatever it is. Yeah, sometimes, um, music is there to help us.
We all need it. We
Exactly. Yeah.
all need the help.
Yeah,
As much help as we can get sometimes.
exactly. Yeah. So you've brought a few props, and I'm going to rely on you to be my expert, to be my guide. We're gonna put together just a bit of a primer for folks who
Okay.
maybe they want to check out some of these bands, because
Right.
I've been checking out Striper online, who actually not super easy to find on streaming services. Um, you can get a lot of their newer stuff, but not a lot of their older stuff. So we're going to be relying on you to tell us, here's what we should listen to and
Okay.
why.
All right. Well, you know, just to kind of go along with my own journey,
Mhm.
I didn't start off listening to just Christian metal.
Sure. Yeah.
When I said, okay, Lord, this is I'm yours. Um, One of the thing in my props here, I'll kind of show um, Promise Keepers. This was a men's ministry, and I heard worship music like I'd never heard it before. You know, in my early days, the only thing I knew as worship music was the person behind the organist, and
Of
we'd sing the
course.
hymns out of the book. That's what I would hear. Um, but then I would come across a compilation CD. It was called Wow 98, I believe it was. And I would come across artists like Rebecca St. James. This was her second album called God. Any fans of Alanis Morissette back in the day would have probably clung to this because it had a kind of a hard edge sound to it. But the lyrics were very much biblical and very much a spoke to that younger teenage crowd that the Alanis Morissette crowd was going to. Um, yeah, Stephen Curtis Chapman, he's kind of more of a folky country guy, but his lyrics spoke to me. I play a guitar, as you can see by the couple of guitars in the back. We have this duo, Christine and Scott Dente, called Out of the Gray. This album, See Inside, was the first one I listened to, and Scott's a wonderful guitar player. I gravitated to stuff like that. Phil Keaggy would be another guy that I would really listen to a lot. Um, New Song, they've been around since the mid 80s. And these guys just, again, very, very much a worship style music. Um, Rich Mullins would be somebody I would really gravitate to. There was something in his lyrics that just spoke to me in ways I can't even begin to imagine. He struggled with sin just as much as I did. He struggled with a lot of different things like I did. And tragically, he was killed in an auto accident in 97, September 97, but his music still lasts. Um, a lot of people know who Toby Mac is. Well, that was his previous band, DC Talk, the album Jesus Freak. Um, when I first heard Jesus Freak, okay, that changed I'm like, okay, this opens my head up to something a little bit different. Um, I saw a local Maryland band called JLM. This is going to be hard to find. So you don't even,
Sure.
this was a wonderful CD, but it's going to be hard to find. But these guys were very much like DC Talk. And then they did a parody of a Rage Against the Machine song, which was also a Christian parody at that. Very
Mm.
cool. Um, then, as I mentioned with Promise Keepers, Delirious, these guys took worship music to a different level. It was like you two actually doing worship music. Pretty cool. I kind of dug it. Ashley Cleveland, love this lady. Very a blues singer, hard rock, kind of a bluesy voice and tinge to her voice. But again, she's got a deep past that she sings a lot about. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful singer. Got to see her at an unplugged, just a solo show once, right, literally in front of me. And it was just wonderful to watch her. This is an interesting band, Burlap to Kashmir, an album called Anybody Out There. Uh, think flamenco, world music, Greek style, Mediterranean style, with some spiritual lyrics to it. But good Lord, the musicianship here is amazing. Saw these guys once in '99. Wonderful, wonderful band. Now I finally am getting to some metal stuff here.
Sure.
Um, Tourniquet. This is a pretty well-known band in the Christian circles. The drummer and its leader, main lyricist, unfortunately has passed away from he had some kind of a lung disease of some sort. But Ted Kirkpatrick, amazing songwriter, amazing drummer. Vanishing Lessons, this was the album that introduced me to them. They were kind of thrashy, kind of a classically oriented kind of style. Very, very cool band. Absolutely one of my favorite bands to listen to back in the day. Love Coma, as I'm wearing in my shirt.
Nice.
This is an album called Soul Rash. These guys were kind of more alternative, maybe influenced by like the Cars. I know Chris Taylor's going to kill me for not remembering some of these his influences, but he has a lot of alternative influences. Mike Rowe, the 77s, a lot of bands like that. Really good band. Chris is a great songwriter. Absolutely love a lot of his stuff. He's moved away from more. He didn't really want to be tagged in a Christian spectrum, but he kind of got stuck there. But he's still wonderful to listen to. Um, then I would come across these guys, a band called Bride. This album is an album called Silence is Madness. This was their third album. Bride was kind of they changed their styles a lot. They started off kind of sounding like Iron Maiden with a mix of Judas Priest. Then they kind of went more into like a Guns N' Roses sound. Then they kind of went and mixed a bunch of other kind of sounds together. But they have this one particular song called "Everybody Knows My Name," and it was featured on a bonus track as a bonus track on this one. It was like on a compilation, and Dale Thompson just hits some really crazy notes. Uh, he has that Axl Rose style voice, but it's unique in and of its own. Great band. Him and Troy, his brother Troy, good mainstay stalwarts. Still doing music today. Might be a little tough to find on streaming, maybe. I'm not totally sure, but still worth checking out. X-Toll. Now, that's a creepy looking cover, isn't it? Okay,
Mm.
so a Norwegian death metal band, but these guys are Christian death metal. Go figure that
Wow.
out, right?
Yeah.
Brutal, absolutely brutal, but uh, encouraging, inspiring lyrics in this thing. And I've been a huge fan of these guys for a long, long time. I mentioned the band I went to see at this little Christian hardcore thing. There's a band called Still Breathing. They only did this one album and they were done. Um, but there's the band on the back. Female singer, very harsh vocal, very, everything's tuned to like A and B and stuff like that. So it's like really low tuned, but heavy again, very inspirational. Um, and I'm going to finish off with three more bands, and I promise I'm done.
Sure.
And I will
No
not,
worries.
I won't bore your listeners with too many more bands.
No, not at all.
Mortification. This would be another band I would get into around the time I got into Tourniquet. Um, Australian band. This album is probably a little bit more black, a little more death metal, a little more thrash, a little grind. Uh, Probably their most popular and most well-known albums called Scrolls of the Megaloth. Really solid band. They were putting albums out into like the mid 2010s, before the singer and bass player's health was continue. He would suffer a bout with uh, leukemia, cancer kind of thing that almost took his life. And but um, I this is probably my favorite album by the band. It's called Hammer of God. Uh, Love this album. It's more traditional sounding in its metal.
Mhm.
So very, very good band. I highly recommend them. Steve's a wonderful. He will talk Jesus metal all day long. That's his thing. But his health unfortunately has deteriorated quite a lot. So my prayers certainly go out to him. This is another band that was a well-known band in the Christian metal circles. It's called Believer. And this is a recent reissue of their debut album, Extraction into Mortality, or Extraction from Mortality, excuse me. Very thrashy, very again, maybe not, I don't know if it was meant to be Christian, but definitely a Christian worldview there for a little while. Their later albums would kind of delve away from it, but and then they would take a long hiatus, but very talented musicians. Great drummer, Bachman. I can't think of his first name off the top of my head, but he was a good singer for that style, and good guitar player as well. Kurt Bachman. Kurt Bachman, that's what it is. Joey Daub was the drummer. Last band.
Sure.
Now, this doesn't have a title on it, but the band here is called Becoming the Archetype. You can kind of see
Yeah, yeah.
right there. This is their latest album. It's called Children of the Great Extinction. Um, these guys, solid Christian band. Um, I got to know them back in their early days. I actually got a special thanks in their first album, which was pretty cool.
Cool.
But think maybe, I don't know, Opeth, very grind, hardcore, thrash, progressive metal, a lot of different styles, very deep, growly voice, but just intense. Terminate Damnation, wonderful, wonderful album. The Children of the Great Extinction, also a great album. So I could keep going, but like I said, that is just a dip in the pond of stuff that you can check out. A lot of what I showed here is really just from the late 90s. So this is like in my early part of my journey. So that's kind of what I stuck with, really for the most part. So
And that's great. If anything, something for everyone, right? We had some folk. We had, if you're into Alanis Morissette, we had, uh, we had Norwegian black metal, which I'm going to check. We had some Opeth sounding. Would you say it's sort of, I guess, like early Opeth, mid-career kind of Opeth sort of stuff?
probably,
Yeah,
yeah,
like that
probably.
kind of. And I think that's the thing. I think people think, oh, if you have a spiritual aspect to yourself or your music, that must mean you sound a certain way.
Yeah,
Which I think is ridiculous, because if you took the inverse of that and said, oh, you're not a spiritual person, which means your music must sound a different way, or
right.
it's done the same way. It's like, well, that's not true at all. Like, there's a million genres for a million and one people. Um, so I think that's great. I really appreciate you being
Yeah,
here today. And I think
yeah,
as
man.
we're winding down, do you want to talk about the Year of the Priest at all?
Would love to.
Yeah, of course.
So John the Music Nut and I, that he's the guy that did Wasp Wednesday with me, and he encouraged me to keep going because I was just gonna stop at Wasp Wednesday and that was it. And he's like, oh, come on, we got such a good chemistry. Let's just keep going. So we did like Armored Saint, we did Dangerous Toys, we did the Japanese band Easy O. They had 2 albums out. And I was like, man, work was kind of killing me and still is kind of killing me. And so he was like, we were like, we need to just do something that's like really, really deep in the DNA. And
Mhm.
he's like, well, what do you think about Judas Priest? It's like, I could do Judas Priest. Heck yeah, I could do Judas Priest. Because I could get up to about Painkiller, and then from Painkiller on, I'm a little
Mhm.
off because that's what I wasn't listening to that stuff at the time.
Yeah.
So, but I could talk up to Painkiller pretty good. And then when I told a few people, hey, we're gonna do Judas Priest, and they were like, oh, could I do an episode with you guys? And so that's kind of how it got started. And I was like, we get Jack Toledano from Sea of Tranquility and in his own channel, All or Nada, which, according to Jack, we get Michael Adano from Grab a Stack of Rock. We get um, one of my guys from the North and South Rock and Metal Connection. His name's Metal Roger. We get Joe B from Waste Some Time with Average Joe. Um, Let me think. Ernesto Ramos. He's another guy we see on the contrary Grant's Rock Warehouse, rather. Um, Help. I'm thinking of Peter Kerr.
So, yeah, I
We're
was
going to
about to
have
say
him with
Peter.
Rock Daydream Nation.
Yeah.
Peter Jones. He was on with a few albums with us, and the Professor. Good Lord, he just laid it
Yeah.
down for us. Another fellow that I met through the Wasp group, a guy named Jake. I call him Jake, not from State Farm. And boy, he brought it with the Ripper episodes. I was just tickled.
Mhm.
We've had great guests that have elevated the shows, that have brought a love for these certain albums, that has just made these even more special to as an album to listen to, that maybe we think outside the box a little bit. But it's been a great series. It's been great for me, actually, really great reconnecting with so much of the material. There's certain albums I know really well, but then I'm like, I don't know the deep cuts from Sin After Sin or Stained
Mhm.
Glass or even Point of Entry. So I really had to start digging deeper into those albums because it's been many years since I listened to any of that. So it's been wonderful just to reconnect. And we're going to be recording Angel of Retribution this weekend, as we're doing this on April 27th. So
Yeah.
spoiler alert for whenever this goes out, but
Yeah.
it's been a great series, and I look forward to wrapping it up in probably another year or so. No, it won't be that long.
Yeah.
It seems like it, but no, we're good till probably about the end of June, I think. So with stuff,
Yeah, I've really been enjoying the series.
yeah, I appreciate that.
I listened to Judas Priest all the way through the whole catalog a few years ago, and it's just so good. I think
Mhm.
even Firepower, and now the Shield, the new album,
Invincible Shield. Hmm.
Invincible Shield. I always want to say Invisible, Invincible Shield. Just one of the, I think, two of their strongest albums, in my opinion.
Hmm.
I really enjoy them. Just a great catalog. So I would say if
Yeah,
maybe if you're new to Judas Priest, check these out. You might not know what people are talking about. Go listen to the albums first, and then jump in. Really enjoying the series.
absolutely. And it kind of ties in with faith, because
Yeah,
if you listen close, Rob's got some
yeah,
little spiritual nuggets throughout events, especially Invincible Shield.
yeah,
So something to look for. So there you go.
yeah, totally. So got 5 minutes left. Anything else you'd like to share before we call it an episode?
Wow. Man, go support Darcy's channel here. You all are already doing that.
Yeah,
Please subscribe to my music corner. I mentioned a lot of channels on here, between Grant's Rock Warehouse and Rock Daydream Nation and All or Nada and Average Joe's. There's so many wonderful channels out there. It all started with the Contrarians for me.
yeah,
So it grew out of that. So there's if you there is some it's like we talked about with the Christian music. There's something for everybody that's out there. If you can find it, you can find a channel that you can log on to and just enjoy, have at it,
yeah,
and support the bands, do whatever you can, whether they're Christian or not. They love those CD sales,
yeah.
but or album sales or whatever. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got. And just thank you for having me on and letting me kind of yak on about stuff like this.
No problem. Thank you so much. I mean, like you just said, the point of this kind of series that I have is just to share perspectives that maybe people don't hear about, whether it's, a band or a philosophy or, whatever it is. People are passionate
Hmm.
about so many things.
Hmm.
And I just love hearing about what matters most to people.
Yep,
It's, the more we can share with each other, the better world we can have, I think. So I really appreciate you coming on today. So thank you so much.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. So with that, we'll catch you all next time. Bye.